Hey guys, this is Catalin, and we're here for another interview. I have here today with me my physical trainer and my karate teacher as well. Costin, thank you so much for taking the time for the interview, man.
Thank you for having me here.
Glad to have you in the interview. So let me read you a little bit of description for Costin so that you know who we're talking with. First off, he's a Romanian like me. We're here in Romania in Bucharest at this beautiful venue. Costin is a physical trainer certified by the CHEK Institute and also karate black belt, I think 3 done,
Yes.
right? So that's really high for people that do not know how that works. He's helping people strengthen their posture, get fit, and train for high performance life in fitness and also in martial arts, whatever that is in sport or business, whatever it is. He's been also helping me personally for the last year and something to get in better shape, get more energy, and also learn the principles of karate when we've been training together. And especially for me, after I've kind of like stopped dancing, was really like a pivotal move to have physical activity and sustain my everything else. So my first question would be, Costin, walk us a little bit of your background, like from your technical background, university, and how you got to do what you do today and everything else, and then we'll go into some specific stuff.
Geez, interesting. Okay, so I wasn't as fortunate to know exactly what I wanted to do from a young age, but I had a good inclination towards math and stuff like that. So despite having started martial arts when I was 17, and I knew at that point that I wanted to do this, I just went to the university where my parents kind of told me, hey, you have the smarts for that, you're good at that, so you should do that. Also back then, it was impossible to make a living out of this, just from physical activities, so yeah, I opted for that. Yeah, I did the electronics here in Bucharest. Everything was taught in German, because Polytechnica University, they got a branch for German studies. And all through my studies, through my university, I just kept on training. Of course, after I finished, right at the end of my university, I had a big accident. I had a fracture in my right ankle. And that kind of led us to where we are right now. Because the first 2 years after that were the hardest. And by that I mean lots of doctors were naysayers, therapists were saying you should stop training. But for example, I would train and then I would go to physical therapy for, let's say, 2.5 hours. Lots of time investment, if you agree. And then on the next day, if I would only do therapy, I wouldn't be as good as if I had done therapy and my trainings.
Right.
My martial arts trainings. So who should I listen to? My own body, myself, or the people who tell me not to do it and to just restrict to small movements like this with my ankle? Of course, I was fueled by proving people wrong. And after a while, it started to take its toll. I started having compensation patterns. I had compensated so hard that my spine started to not work.
You have to tell us
well.
what's a compensation pattern.
Definitely.
So that you can go on with your story.
Okay, guys, so imagine that if you have a restricted ankle, you will still be able to run, but your body will find some other means to perform that. It will shift a couple of degrees from other major joints, like the hip. And this
you can
will
explain it to me, so.
cascade onto your spine and so on. So what happened is I developed a myriad of other problems because I had done that, which I knew somewhere in the back of my mind I would need to address later. And yeah, I did meet lots of very good therapists. They all solved me on their specific segment. I solved my shoulder, my knees, my everything. And I could perform very well and on a top level, despite of those injuries. So this was very optimistic for me. This was proof that you can do so much despite lots of things apparently going wrong. Then, of course, in the last year of the university, we started a dojo here in Bucharest, together with my roommate Tudor, who was a black belt right before we finished college. I was only a brown belt back then, so brown belt is the first thing before you get to black belt. The difference was that I was stuck around brown belt for like 4 years until I got back to the level I wanted to be on. Good. Then what happened? Years went by and I got even more injuries, and I said I gotta find a system to keep me out of harm's way and also to optimize what I have. Because we're not infinite. Yeah, we're infinite from the mental and spiritual point of view, but physically you can only break a bone so many times. You can only screw yourself up so much. Because if you have, let's say, 60 years to live, and you spend your first 40 just massaging healing your wounds, then what's left? So if you want to solve a problem, you gotta solve it quick, right? So I looked for knowledge and for people who could help me solve this. So I saw a man called CHEK on the internet. My girlfriend back then bought me his book, which is some sort of, it's like a Bible for fitness, healthy living, wherever you are on the continuum, whether you want to get out of stress, have less pain in your back, or be high performance, then you gotta read that book. And the book is called How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy. Now, out of Paul Chek's 1000 videos, I really like that he had a holistic view. Of course, we're not going to use the word holistic here in Bucharest. The market is not very ready for that. But people need to understand that an integrated approach is an approach which encompasses mental, spiritual, emotional, nutrition, and also biomechanics. Because you can't achieve high performance unless everything in your life is aligned. Think yourself as a car. If one wheel is turned outward for even 2 degrees, then you have excess wear and tear on other parts. So if you can have your words, deeds, thoughts, and the way you feed yourself to accumulate energy, and the way you move to sustain what you gotta do, then essentially whatever objective you have in life, you are actually building yourself a platform from which you can accomplish your life's dreams. And by having said this, imagine that you need specific mindset to get out of a big hole where I was in after I had broken my leg. And after that, you got to trade in your tools, your mental tools, and your knowledge for something which will allow you to build a pyramid. Because you can use a shovel to dig a hole, you can use mortar to fill it up, but you can't build a pyramid just by using mortar. So you need to get the knowledge, and you need to give up the ego, because I think most of the people who are high achievers can relate to this. You see something and you say, I can reverse engineer that. I can do that myself.
Right.
I see some guy who is very smart, but how much time are you willing to lose on something which you can learn in 5 days, in 2 months? Of course, you gotta spend the money for that, you gotta trade in something for that, but time is irreversible, so you can either use it wisely or you can not use it wisely. So now, which do you choose? Okay, now getting back on track. After starting to work with the CHEK Institute, I found that there is a huge niche here in Bucharest. The corrective exercise market is not very well developed.
The corrective?
Yeah, corrective exercise.
Corrective exercises. Cool.
Yeah. So that means that after you properly assess somebody, you need to develop a coherent training plan to stretch certain muscles which are too tight and improve the function and strength of other exercises so that you normalize your posture. Because although for most people these are not really connected, high performance and posture have a common link. So you can only unlock high performance once you improve posture. If you don't have correct alignment in posture and also in the other areas of your life, then you are pretty much, as Paul Chek says, you are winning in spite of your training program. So you can opt to do it smart and use all your efforts in a concentrated manner, or you can just be on a countdown to when you will break down. So posture is based on, high performance is based on posture, and only if you maintain good posture while you are performing your sport will you be able to outlast your competition. Because most of my senior colleagues in the CHEK Institute, they work with elite athletes, and they can get 3, 4, 5 more years out of people who are retired or who are close to retire from that sport.
Right.
So if I can outlive them, it's going to be the best thing I can do, because not only are you able to practice what you preach more, but the experience stays, and you can gain more experience by having performed longer.
Right. So, with that in mind, based on the fact that we're talking to dancers, right? And we're also talking to people that are already high performance people, but not specifically in a sport. So just for us to keep that in mind, I really want to touch on, so first off, cool story. I mean, I know it, but like for the people hearing for the first time, I think it's interesting. So, you talked to me about, when we were discussing before this, you talked to me about like, there's base conditioning and then there's this. Let's have in mind that we're talking to both people who are high performance in their thing and like working at 16 hours a day, and also like dancers and people that have actually performed in a sport. So base conditioning, and the first thing I have here is energy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. I know there's like lots of talk, like nutrition, sleep, productivity, posture, like you said. So let's walk through those, because even if you're a programmer, then you're probably the most inclined to have a back posture because you're working all the time. You don't have a standing desk probably, blah, 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 blah. And that will make you, like you said, break down in a long period of time. So what would you say about what is base conditioning and why should everybody have it in regards to what they're doing?
Well, all right. Let's touch on a couple of key points.
Right.
Whatever sport you want to do, you need your body to be able to perform the necessary movement patterns. Now, let's say you had a childhood where you didn't have all those child development patterns.
Explain.
Which are actually just the stages in which you become bipedal from just a crawling position. So you start as a baby, you're on your back, and then you start to crawl on your back, upwards, downwards. That means you're just teaching your brain how to use, in a differentiated manner, your spine, because you don't use your limbs yet. And then you start to integrate your limbs, which are just extensions of your spine, and you start to use them as a reptile, and then you start to use them exactly as a mammal, and then finally you're bipedal. Why are we bipedal? Because bipedal man is in an energetic niche. That means by being able to walk with just 2 legs, we can first of all use our arms to do stuff.
Other things.
Yeah, which will in turn develop your brain and allow you to do other things. And also, it's so energy efficient that's why we outlasted and outlived and outsmarted pretty much all the other mammals on this earth. Okay, so if you are better balanced and you have a better posture, because base conditioning means also normalization of posture, so you can stand upright correctly. The more you have an imbalance and you tend to fall forward or backward or to the side, the more energy you will need to use throughout the day just to stay up or just to sit. So that means that you will have always a set of muscles which are by default activated and are getting trained, even if you might not want that. And they're burning out energy. And it's like having 200 apps open on your phone, even though you might need only 5. Okay? Does that have an analogy with how we have life right now, with too many things going on, too much noise, too many sources of negative energy, sucking out your positive energy? Okay. Furthermore, so this is just for people who work in an office and who just want to enjoy life. Also, my clients tell me all the time, I had no idea this is how it feels to be proper human. I thought that the standard was how I was before. I thought I was well. Of course, your brain resets its default to how you felt before. So until you start having results and you have a proper posture and you can walk a couple of flights of stairs without getting tired, and you don't fall asleep on your keyboard at noon if we don't have coffee, until you achieve that base level of cardiovascular conditioning, so just to put your blood through your body and just to be able to perform basic movements like sitting down on a chair. You have no idea how many people have such tight hips they can't sit on a chair without just falling down at some point.
Right.
Until
how can people get that that baseline?
Okay.
Because for example, I know for me, I know we went through this, so I had this really bad posture with my neck, and that was really, and I was a dancer before, so I had to have a straight posture, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So there's some exercises that you do, and I mean we cannot really go into detail on that, but there's some exercise that you do, and it takes a while, and you get to base level, and from there you're not wasting energy anymore. That's basically what you're saying.
So you can perform the patterns which you need to perform on a daily basis. So also Paul CHEK, because he was 30 years ahead of his time.
Right.
He coined the terms primal pattern movements, which are just movements which we as a species had to perform in order to survive in a wild environment. These are squat, lunge, push, pull, twist, bend, and gait. So that means walking, jogging, whatever the speed. So first of all is to gain these ones. These ones are based on the child development patterns which I just told you about. So unless you had a good first year of your life where you had all the challenges to allow your body to learn how to use those patterns, and then you learn the primal patterns, until you have that, you don't have base conditioning. Also, there's a certain level of cardiovascular conditioning you need just to be able to sustain moderate effort.
Sure.
And to normalize posture, because what you're talking about that forward head posture, you can read all about that if you search for Janda, so Janda, good, Vladimir Janda, and upper cross syndrome. Lots of people talk about it on the internet. It only designates an imbalance which is very common throughout our society because we have phones and we look downwards toward them, and we have computers and screens which are improperly positioned. Good. And that makes your head go forward. Now that in turn, exactly, will put excess stress on your cervical extensors on the back of your head. Also, it destroys your breathing patterns and so on. And it creates some sort of loop. It's like a loop, a vicious circle, which will continuously aggravate until you have an issue. Now, because there's a study which says about 72% of people who have cervical issues, so issues with their cervical spine, in 5 years will develop the same issue, but in the lumbar area, so in the low back. That's why our society is so screwed, because children are on a phone and that they spend too much time there, and after a while it cascades into the lower part of their body and so on. So imagine how much effort you spend to hold your head here instead of there. It's like a crane, your body is like a crane. So if the load is closer to the base, that means that you need less effort to hold that crane upright.
Right. And for that, there's a series of exercises. And we can probably, if we can probably afterwards, we'll link people to some exercises they can do for that.
Definitely.
So after you have that, what about, because for example, we're going to get into the high performance and specific movements you need for each sport, like with tennis, with dancing and everything else, you need more the twist or more this, that, whatever. And I think that's really interesting. Before we do that though, so what about sleep and basic nutrition, and how does that relate to having more productivity and energy in your day? How does that work? Because there's really some simple things you need to do.
Yeah.
And if you do those, you're on your way, so.
Precisely. So
Let's talk first about nutrition, let's just say.
Yeah. Okay, you summed it up just right. Okay, nutrition. For many people, nutrition is a science which is kind of divided or abstract.
Right.
They think about it like it's the law on earth.
Right.
I'm certified as a nutritionist myself in this country, but there is a huge gap between what works for you and what the theory says. And I might raise some eyebrows, okay, but not everybody should eat the same macros. And the fitness world has started to rethink this as well. And
towards more of a personalized diet for each person based on their...
Towards being flexible with the macros.
Right.
And by that I mean everybody knows that you're supposed to eat 55% or 50% carbs, which is mostly veggies and cereals, and then you have to eat 10 tops 15% protein, because if you eat more you get uric acid and that is bad for you, and you get over acidic and you're stressed out and you have inflammation and your kidneys will suffer to detoxify all that acid, okay, and then you have to eat about 30-35% fat. Now that doesn't work for anybody, for everybody. And I tried that myself. I gained something like 8 kilos 2 years ago in 2 months. So what happens is most people should eat according to what their ancestors would eat. I am not advocating paleo here.
Yeah, I think it's called paleo or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I'm not advocating that everybody goes vegetarian. There are huge debates over this. But I'm advocating that you learn how to feed yourself and you watch out how you check how you actually feel, what your reactions are, how you perform. And basic reactions are you either have good lasting energy for 3-4 hours until your next meal, or you have a blood sugar crash, which means that you get tired, you get hungry again, you might feel full, but you're still starving.
Right.
Cool?
Right.
Okay, now from the hormonal perspective, it's easy. Everybody should understand that you run on 3 basic hormones. Of course, there are many of them, but hormones are the ones who tell your body how to adapt. You adapt all the time. When you go outside, you adapt to cold, right? When you start walking, you adapt to that activity to raise your heart rate. Now, you have cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and you have insulin, which is your storage and or regeneration hormone, and you also have adrenaline, which is also a stress hormone. And it's like a tug of war between these guys. If you have insulin, whatever you do, if you have insulin, you're storing. You have the possibility, you have the chance that by giving the body a stimulus like weightlifting or some sort of physical movement, you're telling the body, okay, build muscle, do this with this muscle, make this part stronger so that it can withstand the next similar stress better. So whenever you secrete insulin, you can either regenerate your body or store fat. Actually, you're doing both, but it only depends, only the proportion it can be different. So for example, you can store 30% and gain 70% muscle, or it can be vice versa. Cool. Now on the other side, we have the cortisol and the adrenaline. Now, you can only run on adrenaline so much before you burn out as a human being. Like I said, we're not infinite. And because people are so out of touch with their body and with how it feels to just be, exactly, they think that being on the phone all day, bombarded by light and running on caffeine and going into debt, I will tell you about this later, they think that that's the norm, but actually it's not. And it's surprising how many of our everyday problems, some of them chronic pain, imagine how many people watching this have some sort of pain, which started, I don't know when, out of unknown causes and just persist, and they just go with it. They're okay. They won't do anything until it really hurts, until it stops them from doing something which they love.
Right.
Cool.
So you're saying, just to make sure we got to the question, so I love the cortisol and everything else, and I know, I think my nutritional knowledge is just that. Like, if something spikes your I think the glycemic index of the food you eat, like how much sugar they have really and how fast it gets absorbed into the body, it's generally bad, it spikes your mood, then you have a crash, whatever it is.
Yeah, something like that.
So you're basically saying that people should take the approach that every person is different, and just eat things and see how they react to them.
Precisely.
And continue to consume the foods that make them feel good for an everlasting period, and stop consuming the foods that that makes them crash or whatever it is.
Precisely.
Love it.
So what happens is, if you have a carb intake which spikes your insulin by tenfold, that means that's the signal for the body, hey, take all this excess glucose, so it's the circulating sugar in your body, and deposit it, because in order to be in an energetic niche, like I said, we need to be efficient with what we eat.
Right.
Primal man didn't need to have six-pack, he needed to outlast winter, which could have taken 6 months.
So that's why it happens, because we didn't have a lot of food in the past. So we had to store it in our bale of fat, and then we could consume it in the winter when we didn't have food.
So either you take that sugar, you use it to run your brain and to feed your muscles, so you use that running glucose right then and there, or you store it. That's how we survived.
Right.
Now what happens is we sleep less than we did before, even 100 years ago. And that deficit of energy, and it's even worse with athletes, so with high-performance dancers, they tend to compensate this difference in sleep quality and quantity by feeding themselves and by supplementing, despite having improper or less than optimal nutrition.
Right.
Now, nutrition isn't supposed to be that rocket science.
We did kind of like make it rocket science for a second now, like cortisol and adrenaline and everything else. Go ahead.
Okay. So what's happening is, because they tend to use foods which have a lower quality than what my grandma and grandpa have in their backyard, it's impossible to rebuild your body and to fuel yourself as you should for attaining high performance. It's quite easy. You should eat high quality foods, although there is a huge debate worldwide about organic, non-organic, it's still the best option you have. And sleep more and don't spike your blood sugar by taking stimulating drinks or foods.
What are some things that spike your blood sugar? And then we're going to go to other things. But I really think nutrition is really important, so that's why I asked you about it.
Very easy. So let's have a super simple analogy.
Things to avoid.
Yeah. Think of your stomach as a furnace. So whatever you stick in there, it will get converted to energy, right? And if you take simple carbs like vegetables, they will spike your blood sugar less, and it will be a more linear release of sugar in your body. So that will not agitate you, that will allow you to be cool and focused on your work, right? And if you take simple carbs, and even worse, if you drink them, they will be converted into sugar even faster, giving you a huge insulin release and also an energy high. That's why when you drink alcohol, you have so much energy, you're so outgoing because you have everything going for yourself. But then what happens? You get hungry faster, and then you have an energy crash. Now, on the opposite side, you have stuff which is harder to digest, like fats and proteins. And if you mix these two together in the right proportion, that's why I'm saying not everybody runs on the same macros, you can have a better control of your insulin, which will cascade into everything you do. You won't need to compensate with coffee later. You will be okay until your next meal. You won't feel the need for a chocolate. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah, lovely.
Cool.
I know for me, so before I started anything I was doing, like I was dancing at the time. I was like 15, and I didn't have my business yet. I was dancing, whatever it is. The first thing I did, the first books ever I read was on nutrition. And they basically taught me this, like just avoid this and just get that. And that offered me the mental energy to do everything else.
Yeah.
I think without that, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Precisely.
And that's why I think it's so important. Even though it may sound complicated for people listening, it's important. It's just simple. Just have your feedback loop, like you said, and just offer simple rules. So cool. Let's talk about this. I do want to talk about 2 extra things in the next 5 to 7 minutes we have. So you told me about this and I was fascinated by it, like creating a training that develops the patterns that you need in that sport and activity. I think this is really fascinating. So can you walk me through that? And for example, let's just take dancers as an example. Like they do a lot of twists and they do a lot of spins and they don't really do much lifting, especially the ballroom dancers that we have. Like it's not the athletic things, whatever, that's a different thing. But what would you say, like how can they train those things and improve themselves?
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So think that your body operates on systems of muscles which are attached to each other.
Right.
Which are called muscle slings. Okay? Slings. Okay.
So
they're like a sling.
Yeah.
You have an anterior sling on your diagonal and a posterior sling which work opposite to each other. So when you step forward, you compress the anterior sling, and when you step back and when you go through the step, this one releases energy but the other one stores it. That's why we're so efficient.
Right.
We can out marathon every creature on this planet. We cannot outrun a chicken, but we can go further than anybody else.
In a marathon type of way.
Yeah.
Cool.
We're built to outlast things, okay? And for example, you need to understand what your sports and or work environment is. By that I mean, you not only have to be able to spin yourself and to twist yourself, you also need to have a partner who you are pulling and pushing. You might have to bend over, but this is not that common, although in artistic skating, you have them throwing their partner up in the air, so you might need that as well. Okay, so let's say dancers, right? Out of the 7 primal patterns, you don't really lunge that much, but you do sometimes, because you have to be gracious when you step out, but that's not the most common pattern. Let's not give a huge proportion to that. You don't really squat that much, you don't squat that low.
Maybe at all, you don't at all.
Yeah, okay. But you do twist a lot from your torso. and the surfaces might be different. So when you're twisting, you need either to do it when you're in the air, or when you're on a slippery surface, or you need to do it on a less slippery surface. So these all are different levels of coordination and muscle activation from the perspective of your nervous system. By that I mean, if I need to do this with this glass, it's easier than having the glass glued to the table.
Because there's more friction, whatever it is.
Precisely. So you'll be using, it's like the difference between pull-ups, when you lift yourself, and when you're pulling the bar down toward you, right? So depending on how you and your partner interact, you can use the twist pattern a lot. You can use pushing patterns, pulling patterns. So that's basically what you do. These are the three basic patterns which you do. Push, pull, and they all are coupled with twist. Let's say tennis players, they could go without pushing, because they don't need to push the racket. But they need to have a huge stance, like squatting or lunging most of the time, and they need to do a huge rotation. And they use a racket for that. They're not hitting it with the arm, the racket has a certain weight, it puts certain loads through the spine. The same way, if you change partners and she has different ways of moving, it might influence you. If your partner changes, I don't know, one movement, you might have to compensate for her. So let's say that you're a dancer, you just have a very stable surface, it's non-slippery. That means it's closed circuit. Closed circuit in just sports perspective is when you're pushing yourself away from the floor, right?
Right.
If you were to be on ice and your foot would slip, you'd be open circuit. Okay?
Right.
Well, that's not the best analogy, but you get my point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you need to apply force onto your partner by pushing through your leg, through your foot actually, into the floor and maintain your center of gravity, that means you need to teach your body and to align your training with that, to teach your body through training, through all the complementary forms of training you do, you need to teach your body to apply force when pushing or pulling in a twist pattern. So you overlap the push and pull with a twist, and you teach your body to hold its center of gravity up straight with good posture while pushing off your leg. Does that make sense?
But like, how do you develop those exercises? Like, you just look at, because basically I get it. So you have certain things that you do more often in this sport than others. So you want to develop those so that you're stronger in those. For example, dancers don't really need to be muscular. You actually are better off if you're like really thin and you can go fast.
Precisely.
Because speed is the game. It's not like lifting something or whatever. So based on that, is there any like steps that people could take or resources they could look at to kind of develop those exercises, or they just look at it, okay, I need to develop this and they develop an exercise for that? I'm talking like practical, how they can develop it.
Well, it can be very complicated, so let's split it somehow down the middle.
We can do an example afterwards if it's complicated. I was just curious.
Let's say for base conditioning, of course you can find multiple videos on the internet how to fix your lower cross syndrome or your upper cross syndrome. Most ladies, and in the dancing world even more so, they tend to have lower cross syndromes. That means they have the pelvis tilted towards the front, so they look like a duck. Okay? Now you can find videos on how to do that, how to fix your upper cross syndrome, right? So I don't have a doubt that if you're a professional dancer, you can implement some of those and fix your posture as part of your base conditioning. Now, dancers don't really need all those primal patterns in their sport, but what they will highly unlikely be able to do is do the specificity training. So the base conditioning is perfect. You might be able to do it with lots of trainers, but you need to get somebody who can take you through the specificity training even
Designed
better.
exactly for your sport, your movements, and everything else. I get
Exactly,
it. Cool.
exactly. And that's highly linked to how you tend to move with your body's biomechanics, because everybody spins
Yeah,
and
that's what I thought.
does everything a bit
Yeah,
different.
we're probably gonna do that like in a separate video because I think people really enjoyed like a personalized case.
Might I add something just
Yeah, go ahead.
so people don't get the wrong idea.
Right.
Base conditioning is for most people enough to be very good. But if you want to be like the very best, you need a correct program. For example,
A personalized program,
yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Even long distance runners benefit a lot from strength training, you know? So most people shy away from that, even I did when I started martial arts, from any weight training, because I said it's making me slower. The thing is, it can make you slower if you don't use it correctly, but it can put you on turbo if you do what you need. You don't need huge weights, but you might benefit from having a synergy between everything. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Cool?
Lovely.
Okay.
Cool stuff. So one thing I think it's interesting, and then I'll love to have an ending question. We were supposed to talk about Ayurveda personality types and all this bunch of stuff. We're probably going to have links to that. I want to know something because I think this is interesting. So because you developed so much in your martial arts practice, you're 3 dan, like that's a black belt, that's a fairly high level. Tell me about how does the martial arts mindset, yeah, that's interesting. Tell me how about the martial arts mindset helped you in everything else that you're doing, and how is that different? Because for me, I remember the first time I think the second time I practiced with you, you were like, fight, start, and like whatever, and you started to like, and I didn't expect that, and it was so interesting. Like you need a specific mindset in order to actually be a good martial artist,
yeah,
and specifically with karate. So how did that help you in everything else that you're doing?
It's huge.
Yeah, and what are some elements of that?
Yeah.
Like just to give people some, like the discipline factor and everything else.
Yeah, so think that your most important weapon is your brain.
Right.
You can use your body. Your body is very important to be honed, to be able to defend yourself. You don't need to do 200 squats a day and knuckle push-ups every day to be good. Ladies can even hit with their palm. So you need to understand that whatever situation you're in, you do have a chance, you can use what you have to get the best result. What's cool about martial arts is that it teaches you to always take it seriously, because even though you might have the ability to apply something, you need to be able to crystallize your years of training into those critical 3 seconds. Because you don't have a coach throwing in the towel for you on the street. You don't have a referee taking somebody off your back if you're on the floor, you know. So that's super important, just to know that you can do a lot, but despite being able to do it, you shouldn't rest on your laurels. You can get in a bad situation if you are not what people like to call mindful. So that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. Also,
I think the discipline of it is really interesting, like the mental discipline, because because it's a physical thing, you take it seriously because it's life-threatening or whatever, and that's really good in everything else. I know at least from my experience.
Definitely.
Cool.
Definitely. There are so many things to say about martial arts. It's huge.
Yeah.
You need to understand one thing. It's not like movies, and life is not like a movie where everything happens, everything good happens to the main character, and you feel like you're the main character in your life. You're not the main character on this planet. You have a personal universe where you feel more important. Okay, and because not every good thing will definitely happen to the main character, you need to be able to depend on yourself, at least for the grounding perspective. I know that if I leave the house, I am okay. This is not a crazy society as it was, let's say, a couple of 100 years ago. But still, anybody should have a level of personal security, even though we don't live in a very violent place anymore.
Right. Cool. And that's available for both men and women because women kind of shy away from this, generally speaking. Cool. So last thing, how can people learn more about you, learn more about what you do, get in contact with you? I know you have a YouTube channel and everything else. I know they're in Romanian, a lot of them.
Yeah.
But people can message you and whatever it is. And you can, I know you do like online training and whatever it is. So how can people reach out to you?
Precisely. So I have facebook.com/Costin Glavan. Yeah. Also, that page is in Romanian. I'll be putting videos out in English. So there will be resources in English. Please just contact me, English, German. We can chat about your issues. I'm glad to see how I can help if you actually have a thing you want to solve in life.
Cool. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank everybody that's watching. I know we had a little bit of a technical kind of discussion here, but I know for me, when I understood how things really worked, it was so easy to eat healthy now and just to train and just to do everything else. And it matters. Even though you do business or dancing, whatever it is, it just matters so much because it offers you the foundation just to be able to do anything and everything else properly. So thank you again for being here. Thank you everybody that's watching and see you next time.